Hello, hello, welcome all. It's a pleasure to be here and to be able to share a bit at the Florida Climate Week. My name is Pablo. I am a researcher, a advocate, and an entrepreneur working on the climate space. Um, and I'm here to talk a little bit about the book that I just published last month. So hot off the presses, I've released a book called Climate Changed: The Science of Sustainability and How Each of Us Can Do Our Part. And I'm here to tell you a bit about the book, tell you some of the key insights, tell you a bit of the story around it, and hopefully inspire you to take action. But also, obviously, if you're interested, to get a copy of the book. I am proud to inform that Volo Foundation has sponsored this book, and they got, they were behind a lot of the production and helped me launch this book. So they are obviously a big sponsor and producer of the Florida Climate Week, and also they have sponsored this book. And obviously, there's a big overlap between the two, and that's why I'm so happy to be here today and talk about it. So the story of this book, and the story of why it was written in the first place, is I was in Australia. I was been working in Australia for a long time, working in Sydney in a university called UNSW, University of New South Wales. And one of the classes that I taught at the university level was that of LCA, life cycle assessment, which is a great tool that's used to basically measure environmental impacts. So if you create a new product, if you have a new process, if you want to compare different processes, you can use this tool as a method to quantify all the environmental impacts that are associated with making that product or that process or service. And in the search, as I'm reading things to be able to teach in class and to share with the students, I was looking for a book that could explain, the climate situation and these other environmental impacts, not necessarily just associated with global warming or climate change, to my students in a simplified way. We had, very technical books that we need to use to be able to develop the tool and develop the process itself, but a book that was more accessible for my students and for the general audience about, the big picture, what to do, what is important, what are the key things that we need to understand, was not within my reach. And, I started to look for a book just like the one that I launched, that, was able to explain the science behind it, was able to explain what should we do about it, what are the things that really matter, and what are the things that seem like they matter, but they're not really that important or that impactful. And so in the process of, searching this book for my students, I read a lot of different books. A lot of them were either too focused on just one part of the environmental issue. Some of them were too Europe focused. Some of them were too country specific. And so I lacked this, comprehensive, easy to digest book that I wanted to read for myself, but also my students to have access to. And with that context, I started writing this book in 2021. So 2021, wrote it. 2022, I finished writing it. That was a long process of 2 years of a lot of research and manuscripts. I have, I think, over 60 drafts of it, and then it went into production in 2024. Went through all the steps that is required to be able to publish a book with the right credentials and the right, ensure that every step of the way is accounted for. And then in 2024, irony hit, and actually we had climate change kind of push back on the release of the book. It was all set to be released in 2024. And at the time, I moved from Australia and I was living in Brazil, which is my home country. And in Brazil, we had the biggest flood of the century. It was a flood in the south of the part of Brazil. It literally swallowed whole cities. The city that I was living in, the water was coming closer and closer to where we lived every day. We didn't have electricity. We didn't have water. Um, it was a very, it was it's a big slap on the face, right? You're feeling the effects of it. I was in Australia when the famous Black Summer hit, which was a period with intense wildfires that made the whole sky black for days and days. And so, we're all feeling the effects of this. So it was ironic that, a book about, the climate, the change, the consequences, the threats, was being held back by exactly those threats and those consequences. Even more ironically is that this happened in the first part of the year of 2024. On the latter part of the year, my publisher, Otterpine, got hit by Hurricane Helene. And that also pushed back the book release. So it was not only the first half of the year in which climate change and its consequences hit and have, delayed the publishing of this book. It was also on the latter part with in a completely different continent here in the USA. And it was just a big irony, but just a reason why it wasn't published when originally intended. But then we get here to 2025. It was launched last month, so it's hot off the presses. It hit number one on Amazon bestseller for recycling, number one for sustainable development. It was number one for circular economy, if I'm not mistaken, and so or solar energy. And so I'm very happy with the impact so far, and very happy with the feedback that I got from the people who have read the book. So let's talk about, what is this about? Why did I publish? Why now? Why does it matter? Well, we're seeing it, right? We're seeing the consequences. It's reaching more and more people, right? It's coming from more and more of us every day in smaller or bigger impacts. And here's a storyline that kind of tells you a bit of what I was saying before. Like we had the Hurricane Ian in 2022 hit Cuba. You see the flooding in Cuba, and the amount of people that were left without homes. The same hurricane later reached Florida and caused huge amounts of devastation. Was almost a Category 5 hurricane in 2022. In 2024, we have this event, the floods in Brazil, and this is the city I was living in at the time when it hit. So you can see the city underwater, and this, it's literally swallowed whole cities. It was quite intense. And the whole idea is people now more than ever, they understand that the climate change is real, that the impacts are real, they're feeling in their skins, and they want to do something about it, right? And the reason why I wrote this book is so that I could guide people on like, what do you need to do about it? What are the things that you need to worry? What are the things that are just distracting you? And this is the tool of measuring environmental impact that I mentioned before. LCA helps a lot of that. So this is the reason why this is launched and why the time is now, right? Every uh, every little bit that we can counter this actually helps a lot. So let's talk about some of the key insights from the book and like the meat and potatoes of it. So these are the key learnings, the things that really stick out when you deep dive into this subject and research and look at all the different things that are taking place. First and foremost, I think it's extremely important for us to understand that things are pretty bad, but they're getting better. They're getting better in the sense that we're doing the right things, right? We're not doing them fast enough, but we're going in the right direction. Things are pretty bad. We just saw some pictures of just a few of the places that were hit by environmental disasters, which are exacerbated by climate change, right? And things are going to continue to get the consequences continue to increase for the short term, but the things that we need to put in place to be able to tackle that are being put in place. Now we're not going fast enough with these things, right? Like moving away from fossil fuel and into renewable energy, but we are moving toward the right direction. The other thing around, the current state of affairs is that um, the consequences to the environment, they are a continuum. They're not, set in stone or happen in different steps. So it's not like, we talk about how much to limit the global warming, if it's 2 degrees Celsius, if it's 1.5, it's 4. Like those marks, they're extremely important because beyond those marks, things get worse. But it's not like we can go all the way as close as possible to those marks. We want to every little bit matters. Every 0.1 of a degree increase is going to have more consequences, and it will have more threats, and it will impact more people. So it is a continuum. It's not something like, all right, as long as we limit to 2.2, 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius, we're good. No, no, no. Every little bit helps. So even if we pass 2 degrees, right? If we go to 2.5, 2.4 is much better than 2.5, and 2.3 is much better than 2.4, and so on and so forth. So it's important for us to understand that because it often feels like if we miss our objectives, our big goals, it's all lost. It's not all lost. It's going to be worse, but it's still like the fight. the right actions, they still matter and they're still going to be impactful, even for a little bit of the different global warming impacts that we can see. And then the last thing on this, again, status quo situation is climate change is not alone, right? Climate change is the key defining environmental threat that we see today, and it should be. It should get the attention it deserves, but we cannot be blindsided by just climate change. It has, there are other environmental impacts. So on the bottom there, you see a little graph. You see toxicity, land use, air pollution, abiotic depletion, eutrophication, terrestrial acidification. These are all things that can be related to climate change, but are not directly related. So in other words, we can completely solve climate change and still have these problems arise. So we need to look at this comprehensively and understand how the things interact and how we're going to move towards not only solving one problem, but not creating additional problems. Classic example here is climate change, will increase the amount of rainfall in a lot of regions in the world. It has already increased in Florida, for instance. There are attributional studies, I've cited one just a few slides ago, that are looking into how much more rainfall is being felt in Florida because of climate change. But we can have air pollution completely not related to climate change, right? We can have pollution from cars and industries that are going to be harmful to the environment and to human beings, that we may solve climate change to have that situation. Not only that, but if we have more rainfall, as I just mentioned, rain has the effect of basically cleaning up the air, right? So more, higher climate change can help on the air pollution as a short-term effect. But if we remove climate change or solve climate change, we're going to be exacerbating air pollution. So we need to look at those two things together, right? And the same thing applies to all these, right? All the environmental impacts. It is extremely important for us to fight the right battles and ensure that climate change is being addressed and focused on, but we cannot lose sight of these other impacts. And I talk about all of these in the book. Now moving on, what do we do about it, right? What is the second key learning about the book is like, what are the things that I can do as an individual? And here's where we talk about the little steps and the big steps, right? The little steps are the things that you do on an individual level, and they, help you get momentum and they help you start, embracing the cause. But the reality is the little steps matter little on the grand scheme of things. That's why they're called little steps. And often we get locked and trapped in the little steps and paralyzed by the little steps when really we ought to be going after the big steps. So the little steps are, oh, I don't drive an electric vehicle, I drive a combustion vehicle. That's all I can afford. It's all I can, go by. And therefore I'm not doing my part. I, fail to recycle my trash. I recycle most of it, but sometimes I go wrong. I cannot, live a sustainable life for reason X, Y, or Z. I cannot, I eat meat. I don't eat vegetables all the time. I'm not vegetarian. All these things, they're part of your little steps, are things that will assist, but are not going to be tipping the scales. And when we get to the little steps, one of the key things that I bring in the book is that guilt is not a friend, right? If we feel guilty because we're not doing the right thing, we might be missing the bigger point and the big steps, which are where real action needs to take place. Of course, being able to, take public transportation, to use a bicycle to work, you go to, do your commutes with a bus is amazing. You're going to be able to, lower your carbon footprint. You're going to be able to avoid a lot of pollution and other consequences by doing that. And that's great. And you should not, and you should pat yourself in the back if you're able to do any of these things. Same thing, if you can avoid eating red meat, and if you're a vegetarian, if you're a vegan, all those things, they help a lot. But if everybody became a vegan, we'd still have the big problems we have today, right? It's not enough just for us to take our individual steps. And this actually plays into the many Ds, which is, the idea of doomism, deflection, the idea of deregulation, all these tactics that are employed by very big corporations and vested interests in the status quo to keep things as is, right? The first tactic was the D of denial, right? There's no such thing as climate change. This is, made up. There's no scientific backing, which was completely debunked by science and scientific progress over the last few decades. Then came, yeah, it's real, but it's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. It's not going to have huge consequences. Same thing. That was completely debunked by the scientific community. Now we see, the tactics of deflection. Deflection is precisely that, forget all this infrastructure that's put in place to be able to deal with fossil fuels and to incentivize the production of fossil fuels. The real problem is that you're filling your car up at the end of the day with gasoline instead of having an EV. You're the cost. You're the person that's responsible for all this, and that's the idea of deflection: is taking away the responsibility from the big corporations, the government, to do their thing, and putting it in the hand of individuals as if the individuals were the sole responsible for this. That's the tax of deflection, and we've recently seen a lot of taxes of deregulation around trying to bypass a lot of the regulation that were put in place precisely to protect the environment. So these are the tactics that are used, and these are the tactics that really want you to think it is your fault and that you should be the one doing the change. And if you're not doing the change, then there's no hope, right? When in reality, we should be focusing on the big steps. The big steps are, transitioning our energy grid from a fossil fuel grid into a renewable energy grid. And that's not something that you're going to be able to do as an individual. This is something that, governments and corporations need to tackle. So this is something like, the industry of making cement. Cement is hugely required and necessary for a big portion of the population here in North America, but also in developing countries. There's a lot of people that need houses. And so making cement has the consequence of chemically releasing CO2 as an example. And the biggest buyers of cement or steel are not individuals. The biggest buyers are corporations and governments. So these are the organization of individuals when we go from the little steps into the big steps. So it's organizing around going forward these big swings. It's the swing of achieving net zero, by 2050. It's the swing of be able to decarbonize the industry by 2050. It's the goal of being able to divest from industries that are really damaging the environment. And this is done by groups of people, right? This is done by activists. This is done by government. This is done by electing the right politicians. This is done by, believe it or not, suing the government. So there's a whole topic on environmental litigation that's extremely important. This is done by really taking the big steps, which you do collectively, right? So this is where organizations that are thinking forward and thinking about this really shine. In the book, we talk about like how you can, as an individual, can contribute to these big steps, right? So again, it's not you, not buying cement. It is a big corporation. It is the government not buying a cement that is producing CO2 and rather getting a product that is cheaper, or investing in these big technology changes that can avoid the big consequences and environmental impacts that we're talking about. That's the second idea of the book. So the book, the first idea, like, where are we at? What are the situations? What is the science behind everything we're seeing? And the second part is like, okay, what can we do about it? And the what can we do is split into the little steps, again, transportation habits, eating habits, things, saving water, saving energy, the things that you generally hear about when you think about environmental protection and how to be a good environmentalist. And then the big steps are like, all right, what are the things that really need to happen for us to be able to change in the right speed for us to live in equilibrium with nature and live sustainably. And then the last part of the book is where we talk about the technologies that are helping us, but also talk about what living sustainably in the 21st century really means. I was of the opinion that, we had too many people in the world. It was going to be impossible for us to live sustainably unless we went back in time and live a more simple life. Little did I know, and I found this by, again, doing a lot of research and crunching the numbers, it is absolutely possible to live sustainably in the world we have today with not only the 8 to 9 billion people that we're currently around, but all the way to the 11 billion people that the United Nations projects as our plateau for world population. So this is something that also was very intriguing for me, and great to learn, great to be able to see the data behind it. Is we don't need to go back to being hunter-gatherers to be able to live sustainably in nature with 11 billion people in the world. As a matter of fact, We can't go back to being hunter-gatherer. We need all the development that we were able to do in recent years with technology, with the science behind being able to produce all the food for 11 billion people in much more efficient ways than if we were to go back in time and try to gather this from nature on itself. Ways to organize ourselves and live in cities in a sustainable way, to be able to, take care of our waste, be it bio waste, be it, garbage that you're producing um, on a regular basis. And so it's actually much easier today to live sustainably than it was in the past. And the kicker for me was when it really, understood what it would mean to live sustainably. Because in my mind, it was like, yeah, right. But, if we're going to have to give up all our, modern way of life, it's going to be a horrible life. It's not. There's actually a great study talking about how much food, how much water, how much energy, how much waste you can produce. And we're talking, living in a comfortable house. We're talking about electricity, internet. We're talking about commuting back and forth daily. We're talking about having enough food, having enough water, being able to, use a dishwasher, be able to use a laundry machine. It is really not that different. There are some things that will need to do. There are some luxuries that we're going to have to give away, especially if you're living, in the USA, if you live in high income countries. There are some things that we're going to have to be more careful about the way we live and the way that our lives are um, basically structured, but it's not as bad as you might think it needs to be able to live sustainably. And that's, the closing of the book is around that, and obviously deep dive around that subject. So this is, the book in a nutshell. Hopefully there are some things that you learn from at least this quick, brief introduction to the book. But obviously, if you're interested, there's way more information there. I would like to share a bit of my, big step myself, what I do, and one of the things that I think is important. I work for a company. I started a company called Solar Cycle, and basically what we're doing is we're taking end-of-life solar panels that have reached end of life and it would become a waste and go to landfill, and repurposing them and recycling them and taking those materials and sending them back into the supply chain. And our whole vision was that of having a circular campus. So you can see this is, a little diagram of like our vision. Our vision is to have a recycling plant. That's what you see, the big plant there. And this plant has we take the solar panels that are still reusable, that are still good and functional. We can deploy them at our site and use that energy to be able to power our lines, our recycling lines. And then when a panel does break, we're going to be right next to them to be able to take them out of the farm directs and put them through a recycling process, and then sell those materials back to supply chain and divert things from landfill. So this was our case. We've launched in 2022. We've already recycled over 1 million panels. We're the biggest company in the world doing this today. And not only that, but it's amazing for me to see that the vision that you see in a drawing, we actually turned into a reality already. So this is pictures of our plant in Texas. And what you see here are pictures of what we call PV1. This is 500 kilowatt solar farm, all made with reused panels. So every single one of the panels that you see here, and you're going to see they don't necessarily match with each other, is because they came from other uses. So they were in the field being used. They came back. We've tested them. We did the whole testing in-house. We've redeployed them, and now they're powering our recycling factory, which is right next to this. So there's more information if you want to read more about it. There's a blog post about it, telling more information. There's a video that we did showing you the site, and this is this is part of the big steps, right? This is when we organize and we're able to put together smart people working together. We can make big pushes. We can make big differences in the world. We need 10 times the amount of solar panels we have out there today to be able to achieve net zero by the most conservative estimates. Some say 30 times what we have out there today. So being able to ensure that these panels, when they reach end of life, that they're not going to landfill is extremely important. And I'm extremely proud of what we built so far as a company. And this is just one example of, big steps. It's obviously I need to take care of my waste. I need to take care of my own eating habits, and I need to do as much as I possibly can, but I should not be deterred if I can't be perfect on my little steps to do the big steps. The big steps are really the things that make the changes that we need. So with that, I'll close off by saying the book has launched recently, as I just mentioned. We have paperback copy and we have the ebook copy. They're available online. You can use a QR code to go to the link to access it. Um, we have we have also, there are other websites that are selling it too. This is Amazon's the biggest and the easier for most folks. If you do have the chance to read it or to buy it or to get it, I would urge you to leave a review on Amazon. That really changed the game as far as how the algorithm works. So a review would be amazing from you, and you can do a quick review at first, and then if you want to change your review later, you can do it. But the more reviews I can get in there, the better it will be for a first-time author like myself. Um, I also have an audiobook being worked on, and we expect to launch it either now in October or before the end of the year. So excited about that too. It's coming soon. And I just want to thank you all for being here, and hopefully you were able to learn some today.